Hi guys, today we're going to be doing some uh, solving some inequalities and creating equations to solve those inequalities by looking at a word problem. And we've done some similar things. We're going to be using the modified tape diagram that I showed you before. So the first thing that we need to do in this problem is we need to read the problem. So Daniel had $25 to spend at the fair. If the admission to the fair is $4 and the rides cost $1.50 each, what is the greatest number of rides Daniel can go on? So in this top box, we separate it into a number of segments based on the stuff that we will be adding or subtracting in order to get to our total. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to find out what our total is, so we know what we can put in the bottom box. If we look at that first line where it says Daniel had $25 to spend at the fair, we can figure out what the total amount of money he has to spend is, and that's $25. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the 25 in the bottom. And that is the total, which $25. So we will be putting that in the bottom box here. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to find what we're adding or subtracting and putting that up top. Now, I've already made the top box into two segments because I wanted to pre-make this for you to make it a little easier. But we are going to be adding two things. We are going to be adding a 4 because that is the admission to get in. The initial amount just to get inside is $4. So we're going to be adding 4 and $1.50 each. Now each means we're going to be multiplying $1.50 by something. And since we don't know what that something is, we use a variable, or as you guys might think of it, a letter. So we write 150 times x, or our variable. And really, you just have to place it as 1.50x. And I'm writing that out right now. And that says we're doing 150 times some number. We don't know what the amount is, so we use that variable, or the letter x, to help us signify that. So the next thing we got to do is we have to figure out what goes in this middle box here. What is our sign? So our sign is going to be the less than or equal to sign. And we put less than or equal to because we are looking for the greatest number of rides that Daniel can go on. That means at most he can go on this many rides. So you need the less than and pointing towards the x. You need the gator chomping the total, because that is the most money he can spend, and we have to solve for what x can be at the least. So the inequality that we can write will be 4 plus 1.50x is less than or equal to 25. Now, notice that we are adding here. We are always adding because this line in our top box, our top part of our tape diagram, is always telling us that we are going to be adding the two terms that we have, which in this case is going to be 4 plus 1.05x. I'm circling that to let you know it means plus, okay? So the next thing we have to do is we have to solve our inequality. So solving our inequality is much like solving our equation. And I'm drawing this arrow to signal to show you that I'm going to be putting my work over here to solve it. So I'm going to rewrite 4 plus 1.50x is less than or equal to 25. Okay. So like in our equations, like I've shown you before, we want to box the number or the term we're going to move. And that number is the one without a letter almost always, but it's on the same side as the letter. And that number is 4. So you draw it an arrow over to where it's going to go. And then you want to put what's you're going to do with it when you move it over. When you move it over, the sign becomes the opposite. So it's a +4 over here, it becomes a -4 when it goes the other side. And that tells us we're going to subtract 4 from 25. So we're doing 25 minus 4 to give us 21. And then you drop down all of your other information. 1.50x is less than or equal to 21. And that's because we didn't move the 1.50x and we didn't change the sign at all. That stayed the same. We only moved the number. So the next thing you have to do is whenever you see a number attached to a letter like we have here, you divide both sides of your equation or your inequality in this case by the number that is stuck to x. And we see that that's 1.50. So we're going to do 21 divided by 1.50. And 1.50x divided by 1.50 is just going to be x because you're getting rid of the 1.50. Okay, so now I'm going to erase this all to give us a little bit more room to do some more work. It should be pretty quick. So, just give me a minute. I'm going to write out what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to be doing 1.50 into 21, or 1.5 into 21. I didn't feel like writing the 0. So, and then 1.5 and 1.50 means the same thing. So we can't do 1.5 into 21. So we have to move our decimal over 1. So we can make it easier for ourselves. So it's 15. But when we move 1 on the outside, a decimal point on the outside, we have to move a decimal point on the inside. So we'll have 210 now instead of 21. So 15 goes into 21 one time. So we're going to do long division, and we're going to say we know that 15 times 1 is 15, and we subtract that from 21, giving us 6. The next thing we do is we drop down our placeholder, our 0. That's part of 210. Now I know 15 goes into 60 4 times. So 15 times 4 is 60. So I'm going to subtract 60 from 60, which leaves us with 0. If you don't believe me that 15 times 4 equals 60, then you can use a calculator or check on your own. But we know that, I know that that is 60, and it leaves us with no remainder. So the decimal point is right after a 14, and we know that anything past that we don't need to do. So our answer will be x is less than or equal to 14. And I've written that here. We've just solved our inequality. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to solve, or not solve, sorry, we have to graph our inequality. Now I know that my this number line isn't long enough now that I look at it. So I'm just going to drop ones in front of it so it looks like we've got something here that we can use. Now, sorry, I have to reset up the video. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to circle where our number is, or 14. So we're going to circle it and then we're going to fill it in. Now, we fill it in because it's equal to as well as less than. So that's why you color in your circle. And then you draw an arrow going downwards because it's less than. So it's going towards 0, our arrow from there. And that's how you graph your inequality. So to review real quick, what we did today is we created an inequality from a word problem. So we looked first for what our total was to put it in our bottom box because that's the easiest number to identify. And we saw that that was 25. And you see that I'm circling it here to show you that it goes in the bottom box. Next, I wanted to look for the stuff you add or subtract to get to your total. We added 4, and I put that in our first upper box there. And the other box is 150 each. Now, we're adding 150 times some number. We don't know how many times he went on a ride. So that's why we use a variable. And we say 150 times the variable because that would be the cost of the number of rides. And the variable just tells us that we don't know the number of rides yet. We have to solve for it. And the last thing we did was we found what the sign was. And we did this by reading the question in the problem. What is the greatest number of rides that Daniel can go on? And I'm circling that. So greatest number means the most that we could possibly have. We can't have any more than that. So our x has to be less than our total. Less than or equal to, because that is at most that we can have. So I have a less than or equal to sign in our box. And then we wrote out our inequality and then we solved it on the other side of the problem. We figured out what it was and we wrote it here and I circled it. 4 plus 1.50x is less than or equal to 25. We solved it and then we graphed the inequality. This is what I expect you guys to be able to do, and I think you can because you've done similar things just like this before. Thank you for your hard work and have a good rest of your day.